Hello, my friends. Hope you had a fantastic day overnight wherever you are. This week, I'm back with a brand new podcast episode. We're going to be talking to Lenny about marketing, how you need to do your marketing, how you need to consider your marketing in 2024 to allow you to create that demand and be able to move forward regardless of what happens with the economy. So I'm now going to hand over to Past Me to conduct that interview. Thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me. And if you take value from this show and you do not want to miss next week, please do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to build the channel this year, trying to really push the YouTube side of content as well, of course, supporting our clients. But without further ado, I'll now hand over to Lenny. So thank you ever so much for coming back and joining once again, and I'll see you in just a moment's time.
Hi there, my name's Lenny. I run Marketing Outsource. We are an on-demand marketing service where we can help companies with no marketing function, those with a skills gap, and even those who have everything covered, but they're a little bit short on time to deliver projects. I've been in marketing management for over 17 years. And during COVID, I had a revelatory moment and decided to start up a new business, which I've now been running for 3 years. We have a vast number of people on our books that we work with, from one man companies all the way up to Sainsbury's is a client of ours as well. So we're there to help in any way we can with marketing.
Fantastic. And I think the reason why I also like to introduce other marketers is, number one, kind of give a contrast to a lot of the content I produce, of course, but also I think marketing is, I would argue, the bloodline after a bottom line payment term, right? It is the bloodline from my point of view, but it's the bloodline in the respect to, this is the thing that pays you tomorrow, not today, right? And you need to understand that, because I think so many people, and we discussed in the pre-show briefly about, marketing is this kind of soft budget or this kind of thing where it's like, if it's a choice between operational or fluffy marketing that in theory does stuff, but actually does it really? Actually, no, we're just going to cut it because it's an expense. Where does that ideology come from? Where does that idea come from? Because for me, that seems a little bit... Look, I get it. People are in survival mode right now. They need to cut stuff. I get it. I do. Right? But I think the issue is actually the marketing they're doing and the potentially how they're looking at it. Because if you knew it was going to work, would you stop doing it?
No. I've seen this in... I've worked in several large corporates. And there's an interesting... there's an interesting situation where you have sales and the marketing team, and they should be, in essence, they should be best mates, and they should work together, and they should work hand in hand, and they should all be on the same page. But for some weird reason, they kind of seem to be at odds with one another. So they almost like work as two separate teams that are in competition. And I think that when budgets are being reviewed, so when there's a downturn or a recession or the company's struggling, I think that they tend to look at the two separately, and they think, well, sales is they provide the warm fuzzy blanket in which we all stay warm under, whereas marketing, all they do is spend the money. And there seems to be a weird disconnect that they don't realize that actually it's the long-term brand, we'll call it brand awareness because that's quite an easy term to use, but it's the long-term brand awareness which is actually bringing the opportunity for the sales team to then close. Obviously their skill set is closing, and the marketing skill set is opening and finding opportunities. So I think it's very easy for companies who are looking from top down and are not really boots on the ground people to think this team makes money, this team spends money. That would be my thought process.
I completely agree, and I think it's sometimes we misunderstand or don't appreciate the level of journey a client, a lead, a person, a individual has to go on, should go on, but definitely can go on with our businesses to get to the point of sale. Right. And I think there's this misconception that I've been seeing, and I've been talking to other marketers and other people lately about this. And it's this principle of marketing and sales are the same thing. They're not. They're from, and again, I'll ask you to describe it in your point of view as well. But from my point of view specifically, there is two triangles, and this is what I teach all my coaching clients. This is what I do content about, etc. So very briefly, for those who don't know the two triangle principle, you have an awareness section at the top, then you have a line that links to your nurture section, and then there's a line on the bottom as well that then links to your either conversion metric, which is conversion from your marketing team your marketing efforts into sales efforts, or if you're at the top of that sales triangle, because it's the same position, right? It's that info gathering stage. It's how much do you cost, how do you work, what do you do, etc. It's in depth. It's understanding the real nuts and bolts of what you do, and then you have another level of nurture after that. You've got to build that final level of trust, and then the bottom line, as I say, is that conversion, that closing, that sales tool, that real, that skill set that you referred to in regards to actual sales, the thing that brings in the bottom line business. Yes, we sold that deal and it pays us X amount. Fantastic. Is that a very good articulation? Is that not? Do you have critiques on it, etc., etc.? Firstly, but then secondly, how would you articulate it to someone who maybe isn't going to synergize with that articulation of what marketing and sales is in a nutshell?
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfectly good explanation of it. And for those who haven't lived through it, those who haven't been in a marketing function inside of a large corporation or a large company, it's very hard to understand that those two teams don't, in many cases, don't work together. So, and if you've not been in that situation and you've not seen the way that some teams interact with each other. So sales team, like there almost becomes a blame culture, if you see what I mean, where sales know that marketing's function is to provide them with opportunities, but they don't always fully understand the depths of which the depths of what they have to go to just to find
I think the term would be the amount of work that marketing takes to do well. Yes. Right? You could say.
Yes, exactly. So that will be from the sales angle, and then you have from the management angle, you will quite often have, like we touched on it at the beginning, is that they will understand that you need to have a budget to be able to achieve these things, but it's always looked at in a small percentage. It's always looked at as a cost rather than an investment, and I think that is one of the major tasks of a marketing manager. We'll say that the head of a team in marketing. It's like internal PR almost. So you have to kind of get everyone on board first, discuss the budgets, discuss the outcomes that you're attempting to get to, and then how it all links together. And then also the thing that I find now as a business owner is that I try to be incredibly transparent with people up front that marketing there are short-term gains, there are medium-term projects, and then there are long-term strategies. And consistency, in many cases, consistency is the key, and you can't just dip in and out. You've got to understand the benefits from the beginning, understand the costs, and stick with it.
And I think there's a difference between potentially pivoting or stepping away from one of these strategies that we talk about and then still continuing to do the stuff that you can do, right? Like and this is what I alluded to in the pre-show to you as well, because I think there's going to be a large percentage of people who, for whatever reason, maybe they're just starting their business so they don't have any money because they haven't made any, right? And or they're in a position like a percentage of business owners, unfortunately that's probably a growing percentage at the moment, that are like, we have to make significant cuts or we're going to go under. That's the unfortunate reality, okay? What the flying fuck does those people do? Because they also are potentially in the mindset of, I know marketing's important and I don't want to stop, but I can't keep paying for it.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think many people think marketing flat doesn't work. I just think that there's always, especially now in cost of living crisis and the problems that businesses are facing, I think that everyone takes a step back and they say, well, we do know that it's an activity we have to do, and we're fairly sure that it works, but it does cost X amount of money, which we don't have. So it kind of creates a chicken and an egg situation. So if you don't have the money to invest, then and again we touched on this in the pre-show, which was that self improvement is the way forward, which is to get really granular with what you want to achieve, not just say I need more leads, I need to sell more widgets. You just get very granular, understand your marketplace, understand your buying persona, and then go out there and find the solutions to your problem. And then as an extension of that, yes, I know there's a lot of people listening will say, well, that's going to take ages. I haven't got 20 hours to spend on, learning how to do this. There are people out there that can cut that dramatically. So, the first place I would start would be YouTube, which is you can go to YouTube and you can find people who have been through all of this themselves, and they can cut your learning down from 20 hours to 2 hours. And that's the best strategy if you don't have the resources available to get somebody else to do it. Now, when things start to, if you can do that and you can create a beachhead and you survive and you're doing well, then when things get a little bit better, you can hire someone to do it and say, right, I need to focus on business development now, and I'd like somebody to just take what I've learned and then just deliver it for me, and they may be a little bit better at it as well. So
I completely agree, and I think there's a very important point to add, though, which is how much room, how much runway, how much time do you have, right? Because I think sometimes, and I've talked about this in other shows as well, but sometimes we look at the reality we find ourselves and we go, right, so I'm fucked in a week, I need to do some marketing. No, that is not the time to do some marketing. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. This is going to be really brutal and really, really hard. Firstly, ask yourself, how the flying fuck did you get in this situation? Right, okay? Might not have been something out of your control. You might have got stung for an invoice. You might have got a bill larger. I'm not pointing all fingers at the person, right? But I'm saying be very honest with yourself about how you got there, firstly. Right, number one. Secondly, understand that you have no time. So the only solution you have is going directly to market and finding ways to make money through sales quickly. That's uncomfortable. That's not fun. That requires a lot of messages, a lot of phone calls, a lot of uncomfortable conversations related to you creating what I would recommend, and what I do recommend to my clients and also other people as well in this scenario, is creating what would be called a grand slam offer, e.g. a offer that is absolutely no-brainer. And let's say, for example, your average spend is £1,000. If you're offering the same thing for 500 quid, it's very likely there's people in your network who are like, yes, where can I sign? Thank you very much. And that will potentially save you in that time period. That will buy you some time, okay? Then the question becomes, cool, we're not dead. Fantastic. Hurrah. Firstly, take a breath and congratulate yourself on not being dead. Because some people just go straight back in, and that's where the issues start to appear, right? Because then they're constantly starting on that rat race again. But then go, okay, what now do I need to do to sustain the reality I have, or do I continue? And or if you're in that position where you have to do cold, and or you should be doing cold, to create that solution short term, you should also not be taking your foot off the gas regarding marketing. Because the way I look at it is, every piece of content, whatever strategy you're using, but whatever piece of marketing or piece of visibility you're using, it's one extra chance that you could get a call tomorrow about that big project that saves you for 2 months or whatever, etc. Right? And I think, how do you balance the firefighting day to day then, with then also thinking, yeah, I still need to talk about my brand, I still need to do a podcast, I still need to be on the podcasts, I still need to be doing all these things, all these strategies, all these social medias, all these newsletters, these blogs, whatever the strategic idea is that we know works for our business and has worked previously, that will be different regarding the business and so on. But how do you balance that from, I need to save today, but also I need to build for tomorrow still?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of, if we're talking about purely, cash flow, then I think it's a case of, like almost running a household. It's about budgeting ahead. And as you alluded to it at the beginning, which is, you said, if you find yourself in a position where you run out of business and you're like, no, I need to start marketing now, you've obviously done it incorrectly. So I think it's about having that sort of, having the overall strategy for, a year or maybe even 2 years out, where you build into it where you want to be at certain points along the journey, and how much you need to have to be able to do that. So you need to, whilst you're doing your self-improvement and you're finding out how to do things yourself, you need to be thinking ahead, and you need to be thinking, right, well, I don't want to be doing this because I can't do this to grow the business. How much does this cost for somebody else to do? What are the specific figures I need to be able to hand over this project, and then free up my time to do what I should be doing, which is, growing a business. And I see it, I don't see it in medium to large size companies, but I do see it in small companies right down to one-man band companies, where and this is just in microcosm, is where they rely heavily on networking to get their, most of their work. Yeah. So they're not doing much marketing. And what marketing they're doing is they're involved in it, most 99% of it. And you get this roller coaster effect where they do a lot of marketing and no work, and then they generate loads of work, and then they spend 6 months, 3 months, 6 months doing lots of work and no networking, and you're back to square one again. So there's no strategy. All it is just firefighting and reacting in the now, which might, as you say, keeps you alive, but nobody wants to do
Fantastic.
like that.
Keeps you alive. You're alive. Great.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important point. And, this is not to bash any networking, because networking works for a very clear reason. Arguably, we're doing networking now. We are networking, building relationships, sure. But I think the important principle to understand is it's a strategy in a list that you should be using, right? Like, there is also blog writing, of course. There is also podcasting, of course. There is also social media, of course. There is also video, of course. And the list continues forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah,
and something that I always try to teach and also try to articulate is, think about who you're talking to, right? If you're talking to a marketer, you're talking to me, or you're talking to whoever, they're going to have a bias towards what they sell. It might be unconscious, it might be conscious. They're going to have a bias. And if they tell you they don't, they're lying, right? Either they don't realize they're lying, or they are lying. The result is the same, because of course we have a bias. Of course I'm going to say video is a good idea, because that's what I sell. That's what I profit on. In the same way, you selling the concept of strategic thinking and strategic marketing and long-term and brand building and all this growth stuff is of course a good idea, because it's what you profit off, right? That's how you
exactly. And I will always advise that you outsource it, because it's much more efficient.
Of course, but I think the crux, and people sometimes find it very uncomfortable, because and I had this and I think it was the conversation we actually had when I reached out about building this connection, but I think it was the concept of like, I was exactly in that boat of, I'm networking, I'm doing this, I'm also trying to do content, I'm also trying to do this, I'm trying to build and I had a good hard look in the mirror about 6 months ago and said, look, Colton, you're doing a lot of things really badly. All right, like you just are, right? Like, you're doing content, okay, yeah, sure, you're showing up, you've got this podcast, you've got this, you've got that. Yeah, sure, you're kind of commenting, it's kind of inconsistent, but yeah, you're kind of building a community on LinkedIn, sure. Yeah, okay, you're also doing that on other social medias, sure. Yeah, okay, you're also then doing networking, yeah, sure. But it's like, actually, fundamentally, what's building your business? Fundamentally, what's building your reputation? Fundamentally, what's getting me profit, right? And this sounds horrible to say, but we're in business. This is how we make our living, right? So it has to be money driven within reason, okay? And sometimes I think when we look at an uncomfortable step, a step in the direction, is like, actually, how does someone, and it leads on to my next question, which is going to be around how do you deal with uncomfortability? But very quick story before we go there. I was in a position where I was doing lots of things, and I said, okay, I'm going to step back and say, okay, well, what's worked previously? Content has worked for as long as I've been in business, okay? It's what I sell, it's how well I sell it, it allows me to reach a larger audience, and it allows people to build know, like, and trust very quickly with me. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So why the fuck am I not doubling down on that? Was the answer.
Exactly.
And I said, well, because I've got these. So it wasn't that networking wasn't working; it was working in a sporadic terminology, and it was working randomly. And unfortunately, I can't run my business on random actions, right? I need to systemize it, and I need to at least know that every action I do a day is more likely to increase the chance I get a phone call, an email, or an inquiry, right?
Yeah,
but
100%. Yeah.
How does, because that's a very, I said it from on the concept of, I'm used to doing uncomfortable things, and this is an uncomfortable step, and I'm aware it's an uncomfortable step, and I didn't like it at the time. And I still don't really, because it's like, in theory. But also you need to consider when you think about that, is actually the economy we're operating in, me and you're operating in today, is not the same as it was 12 months ago. And actually, ironically, when this conversation comes out, the economy will be in a very different place. Positive or negative, we don't know. But how does people deal with uncomfortability? Because I think uncomfortability will come regardless of what the economy does, because it's either an uncomfortable of, okay, cool, I'm good, I've got this money, but actually, should I spend it on outsourcing? Should I spend it on this? Should I spend it on that? Should I get a website? Should I get a video? Should I get this? Da, da, da. And or actually, okay, hold on, I've got a problem now, and I'm uncomfortable about that problem because I don't have a solution.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that like in everything we do in marketing, or everything I do in marketing, is a test. Everything's an A/B test. So if you've got no information to work with, and you're sitting there and you've got all of these options on the table, and you've got a limited amount of money, you can't do them all. Well, then you either look back historically, what did work a lot, 6 months, a year ago, whatever, or you start and you say, right, I'm going to test this, and we'll see if it's any better than the thing we did before. If it's not, we drop it, and if it is, we carry on. From an uncomfortability point of view, I will always be very honest with people and just say, look, I'll look at what they're already doing and say, well, this doesn't look like it works, needs to be dropped, we need to do something else. If they're a little bit uncomfortable with that and think, because there's an awful lot of we think it works without any empirical data behind it, that's not good enough. It has to be proven to work. And the great thing about digital marketing is, in the majority of things that you do, you can measure almost everything now. Audience numbers, opens, clicks, visits, analytics, everything. You've got it all there. So like, you don't have to guess. You can see what's working and what isn't working, and you just have to be ruthless. And you as you say, it is a business, and you have to employ profit first thinking. Equally, on an uncomfortability point of view, across the board, personally, business, whatever, the best results always come out of being uncomfortable. If you find yourself comfortable, you don't grow, and you end up, and you will become that person who's stuck in a rut. So
I think that's a really important point to mention. But also, I think sometimes when people are looking to potentially, a break, or there's an issue, or you need to cut something, like, also consider that you may be one video away, one blog away, one etc. away from winning over that client, right? That's not to say 100%. You should keep stuff that doesn't work, right? But ask yourself, another way to look at it is, look at brands, or look at people, or look at entrepreneurs, or look at businesses that are like, yeah, they're really clearly doing well. Okay, what are they doing? Okay, what are they actually doing? Are they posting content? Okay, so there must be something good about doing content then. Okay. Okay, they have a podcast. Okay, so there must be something good about having a podcast, right? You don't need to necessarily understand why that is right now. You just need to go, okay, tick box. Yes, that's good, because these people who are ahead of me and are where I want to be are doing these things, right?
Yes, you look at the behaviors. Yeah.
And I think it's also about understanding, like, are you having to firefight for the short term to stay alive? Because there's no point building for the long term if you're not going to be here tomorrow. But or what is this activity that you're doing? This activity right now that I'm doing and you're doing is a midterm to long-term growth measure, but reality, okay?
Yes.
We are not expecting this podcast to go live and suddenly our phone to ring, right? That might happen, okay?
Correct.
And that's fortunate and that's lucky, but that comes from the consistency of consistently showing up and having a show and being in content and talking about these things and establishing ourselves as the go-to expert for what we do. Sure, fine. But that isn't the reason why we're doing it. The reason why we're doing it is because we want to build a relationship between yourself and I, sure. And also, we're also trying to understand, and we're also thinking, okay, I'm alive today. Cool, that's great, fantastic. I can live till next Tuesday. Fantastic, great. Right, but what about Wednesday? What about Thursday? What about Friday? What about next year? What about next month? Right? And that's why I think people, and this is going to sound really brutal and really horrible, but I have a methodology when things get really hard, stop being a little bitch and just outweigh the problem, right? And and it sounds horrible, but in crux, that's what you have to do, because you have to create the short-term solution simultaneously to fixing the long-term solution and the mid-term solution to continue to build brand so that you have the money tomorrow. Because regardless of how much money you have in the bank, that's just a time window, right? That time window might be till next Tuesday, or that time window might be till Tuesday in 4 months, but it's still a time window. And that's what you need to understand about money as a concept. It's valuable within reason in regards to the resource you give it, sure. And everyone needs it, and we can't live without it, sure. But also it only allows you to do certain things, right? You can amplify using money to gain attention, sure. But actually, I would argue, having a backbone of an organic strategy that you can then fall on when and if there is issues with your cash flow, for whatever reason, right? It might be nothing to do with you, as I alluded to earlier. Then you can still have that organic churn, and you can still have that stuff going out. So you're not suddenly like, oh, I can't do paid ad this month because I need to watch my budget. Okay. But that means if you're not doing organic as well, it means you're then not marketing, potentially. Right?
Yes.
So how do people start, right? Because I think we're quite seasoned and we clearly know what we're doing regarding marketing because it's what we sell, right? But
Mhm.
for those who are either starting out or, as I say, are in that position where they're like, yeah, but I did have marketing people and now I don't because of budget and so on. Where do we start? Because it's very, very intimidating, I think, for a lot of people, especially at the moment, because they're stressed about cash, they're stressed about money. And as I say, some of these people might be like, actually, I'm good for 3 months. And they're stressing about where they're going to be in 3 months. So they've got time, but they're still stressed about where they're going to be because they want to be in business for years, right? They want to continue to grow and they want to continue to move forward. So the stress just changes. Yeah. It's not like, oh my God, I'm dead this week. No, I'm dead in 3 months. So I've got to do something between now and 3 months' time, right?
Yeah.
How do we start? What do we do?
Well, I mean, it's a follow-on from before, isn't it? It's like you've got to look at your situation. You've got to look at your resources that you've got available. You've got to set very specific goals, and then you've got to determine, how do I get from, let's say you want to get from doing it yourself to save money to moving for somebody else delivering it on your behalf. So you lose the money, like you spend the money, but you gain back the time and you can use it more efficiently.
Well, very quick, just jump in very quickly. It's the principle, if you're going to spend money on a business, you should be able to work the same amount of hours and make more money, right? So you're still in profit from those hours, right? If you're buying something, paying for something, you should always have a profit margin on that time, right? So let's say your hourly rate ends up being, and even if you do a cost, even if you're value costing, which I would recommend everyone is, and I've done videos talking about it, but even if you are, you still have a rough hourly figure that you work to, right? You may not tell that to clients, but you do. So the question is the person you're paying less than that hourly figure, and or are you actually working on paying things that generate invoices in that time exchange? Because that's what you're doing, you're exchanging time, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if the value of your time is greater than what you're going to pay out in for somebody else to deliver it, then you're then on the right track. Because you're out of that cycle and then you're doing more profitable things with your time.
And I think sometimes, as I say, I mean, for me, what I'm noticing a lot at the moment is a mindset thing. It's mostly a mindset issue because there's a lot, everyone, let's be really honest, right? Every single business on the planet right now has had increased costs, period. Some are 5%, some are 10%, some are 50%, okay?
Yep.
But businesses are still operating, businesses are still alive, businesses are still growing. So what's the difference between those and you if you're struggling right now? Or even if you are struggling right now, that might not be in your own realm of reality in respect to it was 100% caused by you. Okay, but you can still have the mindset of, and I personally have the mindset of, regardless of how difficult today is, I'm going to show up and do my best anyway. And as long as I have enough days like that, it will compound to the point where I'm going to be fine, right? I may have to firefight. I may have to do short-term sales. I may have to fix some problems, sure. But for as long as I continue to firefight and I put out all my fires, eventually there'll be no fire.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the consistency part, is that just where you do commit to doing what you believe is the right thing. And you go in, you measure, you test, you find where the wins are, and you keep doing it, you keep showing up, and you know that that will keep you in the game. That's definitely the way that I would recommend that people approach it.
I think as well, you need to, and something that I've had for a long time, I'm very fortunate to have, is a level of perspective and understanding, right? Like economies like rotate through these cycles, right? Like at the moment we're in a cash crunch, we're in a contraction where the economy's getting smaller, and the pool of work is less. Okay, let's be realistic. The pool of work is less. Okay, but also at some point in the future there will be a point where it then starts going the other way again. Right now, that only happens if people spend money. Spoiler: I hate to be the spoiler of bad news. If we don't spend money, it's going to continue to get smaller. That's the reality, right? Now, this is what, and we're, neither of us, I don't believe, are qualified enough to talk about long-term economics, hence take these asterisks if you're listening as such. However, the reality of economic policy in the country you're in, and that's why I'm not going to specifically talk about UK economic policy, because I'm aware this goes online and then is consumed by everyone in the world, potentially.
Sure.
The concept of your government's economic policy is to either stop spending or encourage spending. In a nutshell, that's what it's there to do. Okay? If you're in a contraction, something you have to understand as a business owner is the government, the system, the monetary policy is currently working against you. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you're still alive, and this is a very strong thing that a good friend of mine, my ex-coach, actually ground me in a couple of weeks ago and said, look, if you are still alive right now and you're turning over maybe what you turned over last year, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, you're in a really strong position, right? Because you're in a system that's working against you, okay? Because of lots of reasons, which I'm sure we could discuss at length, but we won't for now. And that's the reality. And it's about understanding that's the reality you're in. So the only thing you should be thinking about is how can I survive till the economy is then in that other way, right? How can I survive in doing that?
Absolutely.
And as I say, sometimes that requires Grand Slam offers. Sometimes that will require cold selling. Sometimes that will require uncomfortability. But let's go really back to basics then, right? Let's say someone wants to start a marketing campaign. They're like, okay, cool, I've got no data, right? They've got nothing, right? What would you, if you were going to give advice, suggest people start with to gain some data? Because as we've just alluded to and we've just said, you can't do anything if you don't have any data because you don't know which way's up. You don't know what's going to work.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, my advice to anybody who's starting from zero, basically, because data is so, as you say, data is so important because there's so many activities you can't do if you don't have any. Whether that's cold or existing client.
Well, you have to have a network, just for the you have to have a network of people to go to if you're going to do cold, right?
Yeah.
So
yes, exactly.
It's harder, right? And it comes with an established reputation potentially, unless you're doing really, really cold, which is just outreach to strangers, which is a separate strategy all by itself. But yeah, so this person has nothing.
Yeah, so I always recommend people starting with, and it depends what the company is really. I mean, if it's a smaller company and the people within that company would benefit from networking, then I always recommend a funnel. The funnel I recommend is you go to networking, you meet a whole bunch of new people, you arrange a one-to-one, a little bit like, almost like what we're doing now. You find out more about that person. You don't make it about work, you make it about the other person. Yeah, so make the whole thing about the other person. And then you ask them if you can add them into your LinkedIn network. And then you basically, then all you do is with your posting, you just provide value. No asks, no selling, purely value. And what I found, and this really helped me right at the beginning when I was starting off, was that I grew what people would call a small group of connections. So my group of connections is less than 600 currently. Most people have got thousands, tens of thousands, but I can pick the phone up and talk to any one of those almost 600 people, and I know them very well. And what that creates is that, combined with my value giving, I'm always front of mind. I'm always the problem solver. I'm always the go-to guy. And then whenever anyone's out there talking to their connections, they will invariably come back and refer me for whatever it is they're talking about. That's one element. The other element is, whilst you're doing that, you're building up your data, because you are building up that, and like there's even a way of utilizing it without even needing to remove it now, where you can do like the LinkedIn newsletter, which is in essence an email marketing campaign with no GDPR issues whatsoever, and you can get directly into people's inboxes, with your messaging, which is where you can maybe turn on the kind of selling a little bit. And I've recommended, I did it myself, I've recommended it to lots of people, and it's worked for everybody I've recommended it to. Now, obviously, for a larger company, it wouldn't maybe not work quite as well, the networking part, but the LinkedIn part works. But the thing is, when you're getting into medium to large size companies, they tend to have the budget in place where they can spend their way out of it. So I see a lot of larger companies where they have budget aside for recessions, and they're like, literally, if we can double down in a recession, then we're going to destroy the competition and come out the other end and steal all of their customers. That's kind of the mindset. So it depends the size of the company.
I also do believe though that as a small business, like you could use the strategy you're using, it works really, really well, and it's a really good idea, right?
Yep.
And I'm not trying to belittle it in any way, but another contrast to talk about is taking the logic you just talked about, but with brute force work. Instead of money, time, energy, and resources invested into doing the thing, right? So let's say, okay, all your competitors post weekly. Let's say, okay, let's just use social media in a bubble for a second, okay?
But
you're posting daily. right? That means you're turning up 6 times more than they are. Period. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, as long as you're adding value, and I don't personally, this is where to an extent I disagree within reason, but it's regarding the context, I think, right? I think, and the bit where I disagree with your point is agreeing when it comes to the one-to-one, but when it comes to posting, I think there should be a slight, and I emphasis on slight, level of sales there. Even if it's a very short call to action of, hey, was this valuable to you? Hey, do you need a hand with this? Let's chat. As long as it's that, right? Because I think otherwise, if you don't have that, you don't have that pressure on the market to remind people, hey, remember you can gain more access to me by a financial transaction, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but I don't count the call to action as being salesy, if you see what I mean. My thought process of salesy is where no thought goes into it, and it's just like, hey, we do this.
No, absolutely, and I completely agree. And I think it's a very important disparity between those two. And I actually wouldn't, ironically, as someone who does a lot of cold sales, it's not ever cold. It's actually pre-warm, kind of, I already have an established relationship with these people, and it's me saying, hey, by the way, I have a Grand Slam offer up. Look, do you want it or not? And that is, that skill, that ability of creating a Grand Slam offer and running that Grand Slam offer through my network manually, meaning me sending messages, me doing research, etc., has saved my business multiple times. I'll be completely transparent, completely honest with you. It has, okay? And everyone listening. And that's why I teach it. That's why I talk about it, because it can be that kind of silver lining, this is a skill set you can fall back on kind of thing while you're building that trust rapport, while you're building that content, while you're adding value, etc. Because you shouldn't, and this is what I said earlier, you shouldn't do just one thing specifically and expect it to work. The reason why marketing works is because it's a cohesive message articulated consistently to a level of through a high level of visibility to a larger audience, okay? Now, that larger audience could be 2 people, that larger audience could be 400,000 people. It depends on, do you have money, do you have a large network, what's the established the business, there's all these other nuanced conversations that I won't bring into the show right now, but I think it's very important to gain a lot of clarity on where you are when you're doing any form of marketing, when you're doing anything, and when you're waking up in the morning and saying, right, what is the most cost-effective thing I need to do today? What is the fire I need to get fixed today? Okay? And or how much time do I have? As I said, and this is what I said about runway, right? Because if you've only got a week, don't fuck around with marketing. Just don't. Sorry, just don't. Go directly to people who you could help and give them a price that's fucking no-brainer for them, and they're very likely, if you do enough of them, that is just a numbers game. That is brutal. That is going to take time, but that's a better use of time because you're in survival, fight or flight. You're in this kind of principle of I need to generate this amount of income quickly, otherwise I'm not going to make payroll, bills, rent, whatever it may be. But then you need to, once you fix that point, as I said, and I hate to repeat myself, but it's one of those things that I think is really important, especially at the moment, because I think a lot of people, they fix the problem and then they relax. And they go, oh, I'm good. But no, you fix the problem for today, right? So what are you now doing to make sure you're never in that position again? Right? Now, you develop a skill set, and, a lot of the conversations I have with clients at the moment is like, how can we build your skills, right? Because, and there's lots of people who talked about this, but during your 20s or your first early stages in business, the job is to build skills. It's actually not to be profitable. It's to build skills so that then when you're in a level of maturity in regards to business, or the economy is in a better position in our case right now, you can then move forward and grow quickly because you know what you're doing in your seasoned professional, and you don't have any issues with any of these more general skills that are helpful in business.
Yeah, and if you're starting a business, you've got something to sell.
Absolutely.
You've got skills
absolutely.
to sell, yeah.
And you can say, hey, actually, and something, and I don't want it to all be doom and gloom, the world's over and everyone's going to go bust. Look, if you can survive the period that we're in, and you are alive right now, and you are in business right now, well done, congratulations. And I don't mean that sarcastic. I genuinely do mean that, because it's not simple, it's not easy, and there is a lot of curveballs, and there is a lot of realities which are there right now. Okay, and sometimes your network can fix that, sometimes marketing can fix that, sometimes sales can fix that. Sure, but actually, at the end of the day, the person who fixes it is you. Right, it's the business owner, it's you, and that's kind of the last question, or towards the last questions I wanted to ask you, which was, what role does personal branding play? Because I think personal branding is this kind of like golden chalice in some respects, but also this kind of very misunderstood principle. What's your views on personal branding, and or could you give a quick synopsis for those who don't know what it is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I am a champion of personal branding because I operate a lot within LinkedIn. So I don't do so much on other social media platforms, but LinkedIn is, the B2B
It's
social
it's
media
the
network
largest business network in the
platform.
world. Period.
Exactly. So, and you need to construct a personal brand on that platform, because if you do not, then you end up being kind of just an also ran. You're just in the mix with all the other people that offer a service, but you don't have a reason to offer it. You don't have a unique selling point. You're not known as the go-to guy. If you're not known as the guy, like me, for example, people in my network refer to me as, like, when they say, you want a marketing person, this guy is marketing, and I didn't come up with that. They just sort of they just use that as a way to refer to me, right? So that's kind of a personal brand that I've built up
But that comes solely
with.
from your marketing, surely, right? And very quick synapses
Yeah,
again. Like
exactly.
you should
Yes.
think Colton, you should think video, right? That's the two. That's the
Yes.
two words. All the only job of my marketing is:
Correct.
do you think my name, and then do you think what I do? That's it.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happens with me. And people think of my name, they think of marketing, great. But that sounds simple, but obviously it's not simple, and it's taken an awful long time. I would say it's probably taken, I've run this business for 3 years, but let's say I've been in marketing for 17 years before that. So you could say it's taken 20 years to build that personal brand. But it's all the things that go into it in the background. And just moving back a little bit to what you said just earlier on there about, going to your existing list of clients to sell them something to stay alive, for example, is a great example of long-term strategy crossing over with short-term strategy. So you've put in all the hours, you put in all the legwork, you've built up your community of clients. That's the hard work. And then when you really needed it, you were able to deploy a short-term tactic, which is to tap into that resource that you've built up to get a short-term return. And personal branding, I think, falls into that, which is it's a medium to long-term strategy. It takes a long time to build a personal brand and get recognized and known. You've got, there's an awful lot of things you've got to do, social proof, you've got to prove you can do it, you need case studies, reviews, you need all of that stuff. But the short term, when you need to deploy it in the short term, it's incredibly powerful, and makes you stand head and shoulders above all the other people that are doing the same
And
thing.
I think the important point of how I articulate this is how much community karma do you have in your network, and then how much can you pay into that karma, and then when should you stop paying into that karma, right? When you're alive and when you're good, it's not the time to be greedy. It's to go, cool, I saved my ass, fantastic, right, let's just chill. Right, let's step back. Let's not push as hard in respect to sales, etc., 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 and trust in the process a little bit more. Because if you use up all that karma, it takes time to rebuild, especially with clients, etc., etc., etc. And this might just be simply because you've taken some of their disposable revenue and they no longer have that disposable revenue because you've just done a deal with them. Fantastic, wonderful. But there is always opportunities, and I think that's why self-development is a process. I think marketing is a process. I think sales is a process. I think business, I would always recommend people spend a percentage of time being a business owner, period, whether it works out or not. Because the things you learn about yourself in that period is always going to be eternally valuable. It doesn't actually matter whether you have a business. It doesn't actually matter whether it works. The concept of what you learn about yourself and the people that are around you is the bit that's important. And I think that that's something that we sometimes misunderstand. And I think that sometimes we overlook, especially in a credit crunch scenario, right? But as a final thought, those who, maybe listen to this show and were like, you're the person I need in my network, I need to connect with you. How best are people to do that? And, where's best to see some of the content you produce, etc., etc., etc. Where should people go?
Oh yeah, well, 100%. You should jump on and find me on LinkedIn, because that's a great place to see what I do on a day-to-day. Good place for social proof. And also you get to access to my network as well. I'm very generous with my network as well. And anybody that I meet and link up with on LinkedIn, I do try and be as active as I can with those people. I encourage people to, tag me into posts that you want people to see, and that's the best place to find me. I do have a website as well, marketingoutsource.co.uk, and that's just kind of like, a standard website. It's got everything we do on there, and also the projects page, which you can sort of flick through, see what we've done over the years as well.
Fantastic. And for those, if you were going to give advice who've been listening to the show, and there's one piece of advice you could give them to get 6 months time to move forward in the next 6 months, because we don't know what's going to happen with the economy, right? We don't know. It could go up, it could go down, it could go sideways, but what we do know is what we could potentially do, right? What we can do ourselves every day, every hour that we're awake and we're working, right? What would you say, if you're going to give advice, people should do?
Well, it's funny because there was a company I worked for once, and in the sales team department, they had a big old poster on the wall, and it was one of these motivational posters, and it says, and it was very straightforward, and it just says, activity leads to sales. And I used to walk past it, and I used to think, as an employee in the marketing team, I used to think, what a load of rubbish. Now, having earned my own business and had to build everything from scratch with nobody helping, so everything that's happened has happened because of me, I would say that is a worthy thing to stick to. Activity leads to sales, which means you need a plan, you need to budget the plan, and you need to do stuff. And you need to do it like tomorrow is your last day on earth.
And I think that's a very powerful mindset, regardless of how much cash you have in the bank. If you need to, and personally, something I've realized and something I've understood is, you never be comfortable in business ever, because it's a slippery slope down the wrong hill. And I think sometimes we sit there and we go, well, we're good. We've got these projects. We've got this going on. We've got this. But question, how can you move forward? How can you okay, if you've got cash, if you've got money and you're good for 6 months, okay, maybe, just a suggestion, invest a 3-month chunk of that 6 months now, so that you don't have to go, I don't have that money anymore, right? Because that sweat equity, that etc., and how you're going to invest it. So as long as it's invested in an intelligent way that you believe in, right, will always work for you. Because if you show up in this way, you continue to do stuff, and you continue and using your final bit of advice as an idea, action will lead to opportunity that can lead into sales, I think is what the saying should be. Because it's not always necessarily a sale. It could be a connection. It could be a podcast opportunity. It could be a marketing opportunity. And that's the point. The point is to take those opportunities, the ones that make sense, and say, yes, we're going to do those. Right? But thank you so much for the time. I really, really appreciate it. Any final thoughts, anything you want to mention before we part ways for the time?
No, that's perfect. I think it's been a great session, and thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you did, I'll be back next week with a brand new interview, and that one's going to be talking more about mental health. We're going to be interviewing a very good friend of mine and also an athlete, very, very close to me as well. So if you want to not miss that episode, make sure to be subscribed. It'll be out around the same time as this one, but next week. Thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me once again, and I'll see you very